Hello, everyone. Ted Laxon and the Country Thinker here, bringing you the 24th episode of The Eagle Has Crashed. This is the second part of February of 2030, which will have 3 parts in total, which is a little longer than some of the chapters. And at the end of last week's episode, we had a terrorist bombing at a grocery store in Dublin, Ohio, which is a nice suburb of Columbus for those who aren't familiar. And I guess we need to just go ahead and get right to the story. So without further ado, this is episode 24, February 2030, part 2. President Maynard was standing in a conference room when Chief of Staff Pirelli led in a tall man with slicked back gray hair wearing a black suit. The president turned, smiled, and extended a hand. "Good to see you, Scott," said the president. The man nodded. "Thank you for your time, Mr. President," he said. "Now what can I do for you?" "A lot, actually." Scott Royster smiled. "The Republicans are getting a lot of press time talking about cuts to government worker pay as part of fiscal austerity. As head of the Union of Government Employees, I can't let that happen." Pirelli folded his arms and scowled. "As you know, we are facing serious budgetary challenges," the president said. "I can't take anything off the table, but I can assure you that I will do everything I can to protect the best interests of our federal employees." "That's not good enough," Royster said. "We will not tolerate any pay cuts for government workers, not one penny." He turned to Pirelli. "And you've been totally asleep at the switch, Tony. How the hell are you letting the Republicans get so much airtime? I need you to start doing a better job of controlling what's being said out there." Pirelli looked to the president, who held up his hand. "Relax, Tony. We'll discuss media relations later." He turned back to the union leader. "As I was saying, I will do everything in my power to protect your workers. And as I said, that's not good enough. Not one penny, Mr. President. Not one. We have poured millions into your campaigns over the years, and we expect a return on our investment. You compromise with Republicans on this one, and we'll burn this town to the ground. Trust me, we will." "Watch your mouth, Royster," Pirelli said. The union leader snorted. "Have I made myself clear, Mr. President?" He extended his hand, and he and the president shook. "Remember what I've said, Mr. President. Cut government worker pay 1 penny, and Washington will burn." Royster turned and walked away, just as a woman in a gray skirt suit came running toward Maynard and Pirelli. "Mr. President," she said, with tears running down her cheeks. Maynard scowled. "What's the matter, Kathy?" She stopped in front of him and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "There's been an attack." "An attack?" the president said. "Actually, a bunch of them. Reports are still coming in." "What kind of attacks?" "Car bombings. A dozen of them confirmed so far." "Where?" "Cheyenne, Bismarck, Columbus, Ohio, a bunch of places all over the country." "What were the targets? Government offices?" "No, grocery stores." "Grocery stores?" "Yes, Mr. President." "Do we know who's responsible?" "Probably right-wing wackos," Pirelli said. Kathy shook her head. "No one's claimed responsibility yet." "Let's not jump to any conclusions then," the president said. "All right, Tony, get the governors of the affected states on the SATCOM. Let's see if they need any help containing the situation." He put his hand on Kathy's shoulder. "And I want you to get some of your folks over at Homeland Security together, as well as the appropriate people from the CIA and FBI. We've got to figure out what the hell happened." Nate and Cassie North stood in front of the 72-inch television hanging on their basement wall, transfixed by the footage of fire and smoke pouring from a supermarket in Cheyenne, Wyoming. "I can't believe this is happening," Cassie said. "I can," Nate replied. She looked at him and scowled. "Don't tell me you predicted this." He shook his head. "Not exactly this, but I told you that when the federal government went belly up, it would lose its ability to keep us safe." She nodded. "Yeah, you did." "I didn't know if something would happen here or abroad, but let's face it, it's a dangerous world, and we're a country with a lot of enemies. Staying safe costs a lot of money, and we don't have any." "I'm guessing the folks in Washington didn't think of that when they bankrupted the country." "No, of course not. All they could think of was spend, spend, spend. It's like the Cold War in reverse. Cassie scrunched her eyebrows. Huh? You remember how Reagan won the Cold War, don't you? Yeah, he spent a ton on defense and the Soviets couldn't keep up and they went bankrupt. Nate nodded his head. Exactly. The Muslim extremists have been waging a holy war against us, and we've had to spend trillions defending ourselves. Except in this case, the terrorists have only spent a penny for every time we drop a million. So just like the Soviet Union, we've bankrupted ourselves partly because of the amount we spent defending ourselves in a war. This, by the way, is just another good reason why I've been thinking Ohio needs to get out of this stinking country. I know you're mad at your country, honey, but I don't think Ohio is going to secede like Texas. We have to, honey. If Ohio is going to have a future, it's going to have to get out of the Union. Cassie stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her husband. Maybe you're right. I don't know. But right now, I'm more scared than I've ever been in my life. Benny Johansson walked up the sidewalk and opened the glass storm door of her home, 2 plastic grocery bags hanging from her fingers. She entered the kitchen and was setting the bags on the black granite countertop when Zachary ran up from behind and threw his arms around her waist. She looked down to her son. Well, I'm glad to see you too, sweetie. Mommy! Alyssa hollered, and she ran across the kitchen and hugged her mother. Dylan appeared and put his hands on his mouth. Oh, thank goodness you're safe, he said. What the heck is going on here? Benny asked. You haven't heard? Heard what? Dylan took a deep breath. I think you're going to want to have a seat. Why? She asked. Trust me. Zachary took her hand and led her to the kitchen table. She sat down and Alyssa climbed into her lap. Benny's dark eyes darted between her children. Dylan took the chair to her left and grasped her hand. Honey, something terrible has happened. What? You guys are killing me. A terrorist bomber blew up the White Deer on Avery. We thought we had lost you. Benny put a hand over her mouth. Oh my God. Yeah. Terrorists blew up a bunch of stores all across the country. Des Moines, Ocala, Amarillo. I don't think they know how many yet. The news is still coming in. Tears began to stream down Benny's face. Oh my God. Yeah, I know. Benny shook her head. As I was leaving, I passed Annie Davis and her new baby. Benny sniffled. They were just heading in to pick up a few things. Oh my God, Dylan said. Yeah, said Benny. She wiped her cheek with the back of her shaking hand and then grasped her son's hands. Kids, it's times like this when you have to pray to God for strength and for the safety of others. Why don't we say a prayer together? That's an excellent idea, honey, Dylan said. Can I go first? Zachary asked. Benny ruffled his hair and smiled. Absolutely. Andrea Sullivan drove her red compact electric car west on Constitution Avenue. The car struggled and whined under the weight of the banker's boxes stacked to the roof in the back seat. She looked through her windshield at a large stone building with immense columns. Department of Currency. Sullivan could make out the dark areas on the stone where the previous lettering had been. United States Federal Reserve Bank. Sullivan shook her head and sighed. Ben Waters as the new currency secretary? If he turns on the presses and prints a bunch of monopoly money, he's just going to make things much worse, here and overseas. She stopped at a red light. What was it that I heard one hard money economist calls the dollar? She tapped on the steering wheel, then laughed. Devil dollars, that's right. I've got a bad feeling the dollar's about to get a whole lot more devilish. A pretty, light-skinned black woman with large frizzy hair sat on the top step of the front porch of the large home where Grace Mercer also rented an apartment. It was a mild February afternoon, and Tasha Whitaker wore a short denim skirt and black tights with her knees clenched together. Her 12-year-old daughter, Gabby, watched from behind an open window with her hands in her chin and her elbows on the sill. To the right of her mother was a tall young black man leaning against the railing with his arms crossed. On the sidewalk stood a young, lanky Latino man in a ball cap with a Puerto Rican flag, proclaiming, "Mi orgullo." "So what I'm saying is," said the black man to her side, "in tough times like this, a pretty young thing like you needs protection. You know what I'm saying?" "I can protect myself, Sean, and my daughter." The man on the sidewalk held out his hands. "Yeah, but can you provide for yourself and your girl?" "I can take care of my business, Raul." "Yeah, but shit is getting expensive, and hard to get," Sean said. "We can make sure you get everything you need. We don't want your little girl to go hungry." The young woman furrowed her brow. "I can put food on the table." "Sure you can, for now, Tasha," Raul said. "But like Sean said, shit's expensive and prices are going up fast. We can take care of that. We can get it cheap. Then you got more money to spend on other stuff." "How?" "Don't worry about the details," Sean said. "Let's just say there's rich folks out in the country who got more than they need, and they ain't sharing. We make 'em share." "Who are you, Robin fucking Hood?" Tasha asked with her shoulders swaying back and forth. Sean smiled and flashed a broad display of gold-capped teeth. "No, I'm Robin from the fucking Hood." Raul reached out to his friend, and the young men bumped knuckles. Tasha crossed her arms across her chest. "So you guys steal a bunch of shit and sell it cheap. Is that the deal?" "It's complicated, you know what I'm saying?" Sean said. "We're looking for investors. Buy in, and we take care of the rest. No one bothers you, and you don't have to worry about food. None of that stuff." "And what if I don't want to invest?" "Good luck, that's all I'm saying," Raul answered. The screen door on the porch screeched and slammed open. Grace Mercer's schnauzer came ripping through the opening, barking furiously. Sean jumped onto the sidewalk as the dog halted by Tasha's side and continued his canine tirade. Tasha scratched his ears. "Hiya, Mr. Fluffy. How you doing?" Old Lady Mercer stomped onto the porch, carrying an umbrella like a baseball bat, while little Gabby Whitaker looked out the window and grinned. "Ain't gonna rain today, Grandma. It's winter," Raoul said. Mercer pointed the umbrella at him. "This ain't for rain, boy. It's for you." She turned the umbrella to Tasha. "Young lady, don't you be getting mixed up with these hooligans. They ain't nothing but trouble." "This ain't none of your business, Grandma," Sean said with his arms crossed. "What goes on in my neighborhood darn sure is my business," Mercer said, "especially when it's on my front porch. Now both you get out of here." Raoul grinned and looked to Tasha. "We'll check back with you later. You'll see it'll be smart to invest with us. Trust me." He looked to Sean and lifted his chin. "Let's move on, man." The two men turned and walked down the sidewalk, and Raoul laughed. "Robin from the fucking Hood. That's some funny shit right there, man." After the two had gone, Tasha stood up and her tall, lean figure towered over the old woman. "I know you worry about me, Grace, but I'm doing okay. I just don't want you getting mixed up with troublemakers like those two. Won't nothing good come from it. I don't know what scheme they've cooked up, but I don't want you and Gabby getting caught up in it. I'm a big girl, Grace. I can take care of myself. Just the same, you tell me if you ever need anything at all, at least before you get mixed up with troublemakers." Tasha frowned. "That's very generous, but I got to say I'm worried about you, too. How many of your Social Security checks haven't arrived?" Mercer shook her head. "That ain't nothing to worry about." "Then how you gonna help us out, Grace? You ain't got no money." Mercer smiled. "I'm doing okay, Tasha. Good enough that I can help you out before you run with thugs like those two." Tasha leaned down and hugged the diminutive woman. "You're so sweet," she said. "But don't worry about me." Okay, so that ends today's episode, which is the second part of February 2030, and we will finish up February 2030 next week. And I'm looking forward to getting back with you next Sunday, and everyone have a good week. And as always, if you're enjoying The Eagle Has Crashed, you can purchase it in paper copy from my site, clearpeakpress.com, from amazon.com, or barnesandnoble.com. It's also available as an ebook from Amazon and Barnes & Noble, as well as the iTunes Store, the Sony Store, Smashwords, and other retailers. So glad to have you here with me, and have a great week, and we'll get back with you next Sunday. See you now.